Now, Washington Mornings on the Mall. 105.9 and AM 630. WMAL.
8:37 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. I'm Brian Wilson. He's Brian Neiman. Joining us on the phone line right now from the great state of Utah, Senator Mike Lee. Senator, we wanted to have you on for a lot of reasons, a lot of things to talk about right now, but you were a former Supreme Court clerk, were you not?
Yes, I was. I clerked for Justice Alito.
All right, so how is it that the Supreme Court manages to keep these rulings that it works on so quiet? I mean, it's the only institution in Washington, really, that never leaks. How do they do it?
Well, you know, the Supreme Court is a disciplined, well-oiled machine. It's a very well-managed institution that has these time-honored traditions of maintaining confidentiality while deliberations are underway. And the fact that they've been able to maintain it is a credit to those who have worked there, and it's a credit to the idea that government ought to operate in a systematic fashion that honors rules, and they honor the rules.
But if you're a Supreme Court clerk, you pretty much know how your guy's going to go, and you've heard the rumbles of how the decision is coming out, have you not?
Yes, and if you're a Supreme Court clerk, not only do you know how your boss voted, but you also know, most likely, how the other justices voted in that same case, because you talk to your boss after the justices deliberated. And so the clerks there most likely have known for a couple of months what was going to be the fate of the health care law. But to their credit, they haven't been talking about it.
And so how many clerks does each justice have?
Each justice has 4 law clerks, and that's basically their legal staff.
4 times 9.
Young lawyers, and that's it.
And does anybody beyond the clerks and the justices, do they have that inside information, or is it held that tightly?
It's held pretty tightly. You know, there are a few others who know. I assume that certain officers of the court, including the clerk of court, might well know. And then when it gets to the time that the opinion is being prepared for publication, people in the printing office obviously will know. But overall, we're talking about just a few dozen people who are aware of what the decision is going to be, but they've managed to keep those under wraps.
And if the court rules that the health care bill can stand the way it is, what does it mean for the country? What does it mean for the rule of law, too?
Well, it means that the rule of law has been upheld and that the citizens of the country are well served by a court that recognizes that the federal government is not all-powerful, that it doesn't have the power to the Congress doesn't have the power to tell individual Americans that they have to buy a specific product that they might not want to buy. This law offends the basic sense of freedom that Americans hold and value greatly. And if the court invalidates the individual mandate, the court will be performing that function of judicial review to make sure that the constitutional limits on Congress's power are not overstepped.
And if you were a betting man, which way do you think it's going to go tomorrow?
If I were a betting man and betting on this case, I would bet that the court would invalidate the individual mandate. This is just too far. It goes too far down the road for a legislative body like Congress that is supposed to have powers that are limited and defined.
Much has been said about the Supreme Court ruling on immigration, but the thing that I keep coming back to is the fact that we now have an administration that takes laws that were passed by Congress, signed into law by previous presidents, they become the law of the land, and they make a calculated decision that there are some parts of the law that they like and some parts of the law that they dislike and disagree with, and so they choose to enforce the parts that they like and not enforce the parts that they don't like. And what does that say about the rule of law and how it's supposed to work?
Well, it doesn't speak well for the rule of law. Look, the fact that we have laws passed by Congress and implemented and enforced by the executive branch does not mean that the executive branch ought to have the authority to pick and choose which provisions they have. That basically gives the executive branch, taken to its logical conclusion, the power to rewrite the laws, to recreate them in the executive branch's own image. And that's wrong. We shouldn't allow that.
Is there anything that Arizona could do or should do because the administration decided it's going to drop the 287G program just for Arizona? It seemed to be a little bit vindictive because of the differences between the Justice Department and Arizona on how to handle immigration. But it does seem a little unfair and maybe some type of discrimination that only Arizona has been dropped from the 287G program.
Yeah, it seems problematic. It seems retaliatory. It's not something that Americans generally or Arizonans in particular ought to have to endure. This is yet another reason why when Americans go to the polls this November, whether they live in Arizona or elsewhere, if they agree with my concerns that so many other Americans share, they will be voting for a different president.
All right. If this ruling for Obamacare, if it comes down and they split it like they kind of did in Arizona, where you get some things for the administration, some things for those who opposed it, if it kicks it back to Congress saying the individual mandate is unconstitutional, but you guys got to fix the rest, how big of a heavy lift is that? I know Nancy Pelosi recently said that without the individual mandate, this whole thing is basically gone. But what will happen, and can it be salvaged at all, or will you just try and repeal this thing later down the road?
Well, I don't think that we ought to try to surgically repair a larger statute that will have been rendered inoperable without the individual mandate. I think we ought to repeal it, and anything that we replace it with ought to be managed and debated and discussed on a sensible, step-by-step basis, so that we see to it that anything that we pass makes sense to the American people and will put Americans and their doctors back in charge of their health care decisions, rather than moving inexorably in the direction of giving that power over to government bureaucrats in Washington.
Do you have any thoughts about the fact that the senior senator from Utah apparently won his primary last night in a big way?
I wish him well. I enjoy working with Senator Hatch, and I've said all along that I will welcome and wholeheartedly endorse whichever Republican candidate ends up getting the endorsement and ends up getting the nomination. And I hereby endorse and fully throw my support behind Senator Hatch. Look forward to working with him as we move forward.
All right. Senator Buckley, good to have you on the program. We thank you very much.
Thanks, Senator.